Hello, this is Colin Goebel. Let's continue this with step 3 of our development of Catch the Clown by adding some finishing touches, if you will, to make our game have a slightly more polished and finished appearance. First of all, let's go to our room. Let's double click on level 1. With the settings on the settings tab here, I'll just click settings. Let's give our room a caption. Let's call it Catch the Clown. And let's give the room also a background instead of the rather dull gray color that we see here. Let's go find ourselves a background. I'll right click on the background tab. Let's create a background. Let's call it BACK. Let's call it room, a background for the room. And let's load a background. Now we can load any image file that we want in the resources that you downloaded for this tutorial. You should find a file called background.bmp. Again, any bitmap file will be fine. Let's open that file and load it as a background called back_room. Let's click on OK there. Notice it's 107 by 103 pixels, by the way. Let's click on OK. Let's go to our room. Let's go to backgrounds. And instead of drawing our gray color, or any other color, by the way, notice we could have used this color palette. That's a rather nasty color, I think. Let's not draw a background color. I'll uncheck that. And where it says no background here, let's click on that icon there. Let's click on back room, which was the background we just created. And notice I'm tiling horizontally on vertically. If I don't tile, I just get one very small background image, and clearly that's not what we're looking for. So I'll tile that horizontally, I'll tile it vertically, and now we have a background to our room. Okay, let's click the run button, and let's see what our game looks like at this point. And the one thing to notice is I have a caption here, and when we click, the score goes up, and you'll notice also that we had a background color. Just doesn't make any difference, but I'll just put that back to green. Now we'd also, of course, like to have some background music. So, oh, I had that there from something I was doing previously. Sorry. So let's add a sound to our operation, to our game here. Let's create a sound. Let's call it SND background. Let's load the background music. So in the resources file, I use the file music.mid. Now for music, for sound effects like gunshots and bounces, wave files are just fine. But for music clips, we really should use MIDI files, at least in this class. GameMaker allows you to use MP3s, but the trouble with MP3s is they'll make your games very large in terms of the size of the GMK and the executable. And that means it'll take a long time for you to upload the file and a long time for me to download the file. So for this class, please stick to MIDI files only. The one we'll use here is music.mid. And so now I've got a background sound called music.mid. We've set it up as background music, so that's what it's going to be. We don't need 3D, we don't need any effects, but we might just listen to it. Okay, so there's our background sound, and we now need to incorporate it into our room. Okay, the best way to do this, although not the simplest, not the way that's presented in the written tutorial, but let's create an object here, and let's call it obj_controller. Now the controller object is going to be an invisible object, so I'll uncheck visible. The player is never going to see it when he plays the game, but it's an object that I'm going to place in the room. So I'll go over here and, under objects, an object to add with left mouse. Let's add that controller object. I'll put it right there. As you can see, it currently doesn't have a sprite associated with it, so we get a little question mark. So although the controller is in the room, it's completely invisible to the user. But the purpose of it is so that when it's created, which of course happens when the room is created because the controller is in the room, when the controller is created, we're going to use the creation event to play the sound. So on the, let's see here, on the main one tab, right here we have the sound. I'm going to play the sound. It's of course going to be the background music. And in this situation, I do want to loop because when the music clip gets to the end, we want to start again. Okay, so now if I play this game, you'll notice when it starts up, I hope. Let's see what happens. Yep. You'll notice that we have a heading in the room, the score is being increased, and the music is being played. Now you might prefer, you might think that little object there, the controller object, that little blue thing. Sorry, that thing's getting in the way for you to see it, but that little blue question mark is a little hard to see. I think it is too, so I'm actually going to add a new sprite. I'll create a sprite. Let's load a sprite from somewhere. Actually, I've used in Program Files, GameMaker 8. That's the installation directory for GameMaker 8. There's a subfolder there called Sprites. And in the Maze platform set of folders, let's take something here. Let's take a detonator anyway. So I'll choose the detonator sprite. And it doesn't really matter what it is. There's a picture of our detonator. It also happens to be 32 by 32. Let's call it SPR controller. There's the controller sprite. Let's connect that with the controller object. So instead of no sprite, let's change that to SPR controller. And now what happens in the room is up there, instead of that little question mark, you'll see the controller sprite. Probably looks a little better. Notice in the room, of course, notice when you, well, excuse me, notice the controller object is still not visible. So when we play the game, even though there's a detonator sprite sitting in the room, of course it's not going to be visible. Okay, very good. So there's our room. We have our background music going. The room has a name, and things are looking a lot better. So we also want to make the game, I think, a little less predictable and a little more interesting. So what I'm going to do is let's take a look at the clown object, and I'm going to create a new event. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to go to the create event, where we start moving in a random direction. And I'm going to, on the timing group here on the main 2 tab, I'm going to set an alarm. And this is exactly like at night when you set the alarm clock in your bedroom. So I am going to set an alarm to go off in 45 game steps. Now remember that by default there are 30 game steps, or 30 frames if you like, every second. So by setting that to 45, the alarm is going to go off exactly 1.5 seconds after the game begins. I have many alarm clocks, as you can see. In this case, I'm only interested in one, which I'll call alarm 0. And I might just notice that every object in the game has its own completely independent set of alarms. Just like, thank goodness, that if you set your alarm clock, it has absolutely no effect on my alarm clock. The world would be a strange place if everybody used the same alarm clock. So just like in real life, every object has its own set of alarms. In fact, every instance of every object has its own set of alarms. And all we've done here is to specify that the clown's alarm is to go off after 45 game steps. Now, the next big issue, of course, is what happens when the clown's alarm clock goes off. Okay, that creates an event. So I'm going to add an event to the clown object. It's the alarm event, and it's alarm 0, because that's the one that got set. And the question we must now answer is what set of actions must occur when the alarm goes off? Well, what I'd like to do is change the direction that the clown is moving. So once again, I'm going to use the move fixed. I'm going to select all of those directions except the middle one at random. And let's click the OK button. Oh, first of all, I need to set the speed to relative, otherwise the clown will come to a complete halt. I need relative so that the speed doesn't change. I'm going to add 0 to the speed, not set the speed to 0. And one more thing that I must do. The thing to notice here, if I run the game now, notice that the clowns don't actually, they change direction once and only once. Let me show you. Okay, so you'll notice that when the clowns only change direction once. And the reason for that is when the alarm goes off, we must not only start moving in a random direction, but we must also reset the alarm. So when the alarm goes off, I start moving in a direction, and I must also set the alarm again. So one way to think about that is when an alarm goes off, it's automatically unset. And if you want it to go off a second time, you have to set it again. Now I could set it so that it goes off in 45 steps, which would mean that exactly every second and a half, those clowns would start moving in a different direction. But let's make this a little more interesting. Let's change the formula there to 35 plus random 20. Now, if you think about the math here, random 20 is a function built into GameMaker. Notice it's a lowercase r and the 20 is in parentheses, just like in ordinary algebra. Random 20 is a function which returns at random a number between 0 and 20. So if you add that to 35, you'll wind up with a number that is between 35 and 55 randomly distributed. Well, on average, it will be 45, of course, because that's the midpoint. But randomly, these clowns will change at a random number of game steps between 35 and 55. So let's click the OK button. Let's click the Start button, and let's see if the clowns start changing direction. Random times. Okay, well that seems to be working well. The clowns are changing at random times, and our game seems to be coming along quite nicely. One more thing that we probably ought to do is there's a page here called Game Information, and in here we can just type some simple information. Let's say catch the clown. By Colin Goebel. The objective is to click, whoops, can't type, click on the clown as often as you can. Obviously, that's a not particularly inspired set of instructions, but I don't want to take time. Obviously, we can format this just like anything in Microsoft Word. Let's center those instructions up. Let's save that. And then, of course, when we play the game, every time I hit the F1 button, which is the help screen for the game, let's just demonstrate that, then the instructions appear, as you can see. So I would ask that in every game you do in this class, please be sure you complete the game information page with your name, the name of the game that you've written, and a simple set of instructions so that anyone can see how to use it. Well, I think at that point we have the beginnings of a game of Catch the Clown. Hopefully you've got a good idea of the basic operation of Game Maker, and I hope you continue to enjoy using it. Thank you for your attention.